I am a professor of infectious diseases and medicine, and have a long history of vaccine research in my medical school, St. George's, which you may know was the medical school that Edward Jenner trained in, the father of human vaccination experimentation. And it's been a great pleasure to see, of course, vaccines developing in a very strong way to becoming one of the most important aspects of medical science and healthcare in the world. Vaccination, of course, has saved billions of lives throughout the history. And one of the things which has happened has been the establishment of very clear pediatric vaccination schedules. For example, measles, mumps, rubella, polio, diphtheria have all been the subject of vaccine protocols and have virtually eradicated these diseases. So with that in mind, we set about to think about the next steps for vaccines. And two things happened. The first, in FEAM, Federation of European Academies of Medicine, was that we carried out a very in-depth study which was published by SAPIR, the Science Advice for Policy in Europe, on transforming aging. And Jean-Pierre Michel was the leader of this, and it was a great pleasure to work with him in that. At the end of this, we thought, well, vaccination in older people, and by older I mean over 65, is actually just as important now as in the pediatric population. And we set about to think how we could bring vaccination for older people together. And FEAM was an ideal way to do this. The Federation of European Academies of Medicine has 23 host academies, and putting all of these together, there was very, very good expertise across the whole field of vaccinology and old age and geriatric medicine. So with that in mind, Jean-Pierre and I set about to look at a schedule that would include all of the important aspects of vaccinology in the over 65-year population. And of course, Elisa in the FEAM office, one of the senior executives, was a great help in pulling these things together, contacting people and so on. So we embarked to get experts from the FEAM academies, and had no trouble in getting experts from academies throughout Europe who would look at the immune response in older people, who would look at the vaccination schedules throughout Europe, and would look at clinical trials for vaccines in the over 65s. And the result of this work has been the production of a document which covers all of these important aspects. And we're very grateful to GlaxoSmithKline for giving an unconditional grant to help to do this. They took no part whatsoever in selecting people or in the topics that were chosen. Now, the important things which we found, first of all, that throughout the European Union, individual states are responsible for defining their own vaccine schedules. There is no commonality between the individual countries, and this clearly is something that could be looked at in the future. The next thing that we looked at was the immune system in the aging population. This is still a very controversial area. Does the immune system still work well in the over 65s and indeed into even the 80-year-olds? And there's no doubt that it alters, but we know that it works actually pretty well. And there's an excellent chapter written by Derek McCallan in my old medical school, where he's looked at the aging immune system. Now, this has all been going on, of course, during the COVID pandemic. And if there's any one good thing which has emerged from the COVID pandemic, it is the knowledge that the messenger RNA vaccines elicit very, very good immune responses, both T cell and antibody in older people. Plus the fact, of course, that the technology for producing messenger RNA and now making it stable has been a great advance, and undoubtedly this will be something for the future of vaccinology throughout all age groups, but particularly in the older age group. One of the things we looked at was the challenge of clinical trials in the older population, and this in fact received quite a lot of attention. And certainly one of the recommendations that we think is very, very important is that when new vaccines are being tried, particularly in infections or tumors for that matter, which occur in the older population, then this population must be part of clinical trials to ensure that we know exactly what the immune responses are, and indeed later on what the protection is in these people. Of course, in older age, multiple morbidity and immunocompromised host occurs. And this can be either through medication, such as, of course, as steroids for damping down the immune system, or transplantation, or chemotherapy. So that is another very, very important group to concentrate on, making sure that the immune response is adequate. And we now know, of course, that there are good adjuvants to give to the older population. Now, there are many vaccines now available for the over 65s, and these are very, very important. We all know about influenza, which, and hopefully there'll be big advances in influenza vaccination when a pan-influenza vaccine is achieved, rather than the annual adjustment of the vaccine. Shingles, of course, is very important in the older population, and with the adjuvants which are now available, there are very, very good shingles vaccines. There's the beginning of thought in the older population that they can get diseases from the from their grandchildren, respiratory syncytial virus, for example, and even diphtheria. in undeveloped countries. And it could be that in the future, some of these pediatric infections need to be looked at in terms of vaccinating in the older population. And of course, whooping cough is one of the ones where we know that immunity to vaccination wanes over time. So in summary, this has been a very, very interesting area for us to look at in FEAM. We're very grateful to the authors who have put a lot of time into summarizing the areas that we discussed, and we look forward in the future to vaccination being an important therapeutic modality in the older population.